My work rival, accidentally called me at midnight. I wasn't supposed to hear what she said about me. My phone buzzed against the nightstand at 11:58, and for 3 full seconds I almost let it ring out. Then I saw the name on the screen. Sienna Cross. My rival. My nemesis. The woman who had beaten me to the last 2 project leads by a margin so thin it still kept me up some nights. Calling me at midnight on a Tuesday. I answered before I could talk myself out of it, already composing a smug hello in my head. There was no hello waiting for me, just her voice. Muffled, distant, clearly not aimed at the phone at all. I don't want to like him. Talia. That's the problem. I've spent 2 years building a wall so nobody at that firm gets close enough to use me again. And then Marcus Doyle stays until 9, helping me fix a truss calculation he didn't even have to touch. And the call cut off. Pocket dial, I realized. A full second too late to memorize anything else. I sat there in the dark with the phone still warm against my ear, replaying 4 sentences that had just rearranged my entire understanding of the last 2 years of my life. I should probably explain who I am before this gets any stranger. My name is Marcus Doyle. I'm 29 years old, and I've spent the last 4 years as a structural engineer at Voss & Bell, a mid-sized architecture and engineering firm tucked into a converted warehouse near the rail yards in Denver. I like problems that have a correct answer, load calculations, tolerances, the exact moment a beam will fail if you push it too far. I am considerably less equipped to handle problems that don't have a correct answer, which is most of what happened after that phone call. I joined the firm the same month Sienna Cross did, both of us fresh out of licensing exams, both of us assigned to the same senior partner, both of us hungry in a way that made every shared project feel like a small war. She was sharper than me on concept, and I was faster on execution. And somewhere in year 1, the difference calcified into a rivalry the entire office had opinions about. People took sides. People made bets. Our senior partner, a razor-precise man named Preston Voss, treated the whole thing like free labor, pitting us against each other on pitch after pitch because it was, in his words, good for the work. It had never once occurred to me that any part of what Sienna Cross felt about me might not be contempt. The rivalry had a specific origin, if I'm being honest about it, and it dated back almost to our first month at the firm. Voss had assigned us both to a small retail renovation on Colfax, our first real project without a senior engineer or architect hovering over every decision. And I'd made a structural call late one Friday that Sienna disagreed with on site. She'd redlined my drawings before I even got back from lunch, left them on my desk with 3 pages of margin notes in a handwriting so sharp it looked like it could cut paper on its own. I redid the calculations that weekend out of pure spite, proved her wrong on 2 of the 3 notes, and walked into the office Monday morning ready to gloat. She'd looked at my corrected drawings for exactly 4 seconds, said, "Fine, you were right about the header," and then spent the rest of the meeting arguing me into the ground on the 3rd note, which turned out to be the one that actually mattered. I'd lost that argument in front of the whole team, and something about losing to her, cleanly, without her ever raising her voice, had lodged itself under my skin in a way 4 years hadn't managed to shake loose. Every project after that became, on some level, an attempt to even a score neither of us ever spoke about out loud. By the time we hit our 2nd year, the rest of the office had turned it into entertainment. People placed quiet bets on who'd win a given pitch. Someone had, at one point, taped a scoreboard to the break room refrigerator with our initials on it, which Voss had left up for 3 weeks before finally taking it down, not because he disapproved, But because he said it was distracting people from their actual deadlines, I'd hated her, or told myself I did, with the specific dedication of someone protecting a much softer feeling underneath. We'd developed our own private shorthand over the years without either of us admitting it was one. She called my structural fixes the Doyle patch, half insult, half acknowledgement that they usually worked. I called her design revisions the cross correction, and we both knew the nicknames had started as mockery and slowly become something closer to respect. Neither of us wanted to name out loud. Co-workers had stopped asking which one of us would end up running the design department someday. The general office consensus had settled, quietly, on both. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there, running the sentence back and forth like a load calculation I couldn't balance. I don't want to like him. That's the problem. Two truths sat next to each other and refused to reconcile the version of Sienna I'd built in my head over 4 years. All cool eyes and clipped opinions in client meetings, and the version I'd just heard by accident, tired and unguarded at midnight, admitting something she clearly never meant for me to hear. By 6 in the morning, I'd made exactly one decision. I was not going to say anything. I was going to walk into that office, act like every other Wednesday, and pretend my whole world view hadn't just been rearranged by a 4-second phone call. That plan lasted until 8:15, when Sienna walked past my desk with 2 coffees, set one down without looking at me, and said, "You looked like you needed it," in the exact same flat voice she used to tell me my column spacing was wrong. I stared at the coffee, then at her. "Did you poison this? If I wanted you gone, Doyle, I'd let you keep making that mistake with the north stairwell load path." She dropped into her chair across the aisle, opened her laptop, and didn't look at me again for 11 minutes. Which I know because I counted. Because apparently counting things was now how I processed emotion. Voss and Bell occupied the 2nd floor of an old brick warehouse. Exposed beams overhead, concrete floors that held the cold all winter, big steel-framed windows that let in more light than any office had a right to. My desk sat directly across the aisle from Sienna's, a placement Voss had made on purpose in year 1, claiming proximity sharpened both of us. It had mostly just given me 4 years of watching her work out of the corner of my eye. She drew in charcoal before she ever touched a computer, and she had a habit of tapping her pencil against her lower lip when a design wasn't cooperating, and I had never once let myself notice either of those things until that morning, when suddenly I couldn't stop. I made it through the morning meeting without saying anything stupid. Around 11, the 2 of us got pulled into a smaller huddle with a junior associate named Priya over a permit issue on an unrelated project. And Sienna spent 10 straight minutes dismantling my argument about egress widths with the same clinical precision she'd used on me in year 1. Except this time I caught myself watching the way her hands moved when she talked, instead of actually listening to the argument, which is how I ended up conceding a point I was fairly sure I'd actually won. "You're being unusually agreeable today," Priya said afterward, once Sienna had gone to refill her coffee. "Normally you'd have fought her on the egress width for another 20 minutes out of principle. I had somewhere to be. You did not have somewhere to be. You've been at your desk since 7. Priya narrowed her eyes at me with the particular suspicion of someone who'd spent 2 years watching our rivalry from the next desk over. "Did something happen with you two?" "Nothing happened, Marcus." I said nothing happened. I said, in a tone that apparently convinced nobody, because Priya just smiled to herself and went back to her monitor, and I spent the next hour actively avoiding eye contact with Sienna across the aisle, which she noticed immediately, because avoiding her was somehow more obvious than the thing I was trying to avoid doing. Around 3, she wandered over to my desk, under the flimsy pretense of asking about a column schedule she clearly already understood, leaned against the edge of it, and studied me with the same clinical attention she gave a bad detail drawing. "You've been weird since this morning." "I'm not weird. I'm focused. You used my exact excuse from an hour ago." "That's not a coincidence, Doyle. That's a pattern." She crossed her arms, and there was something almost playful under the sharpness. A crack of light I hadn't let myself notice before yesterday. "Did I do something?" "You brought me coffee." "That's not a crime. It's out of character," I said. "You've spent 4 years making sure I know exactly how little you think of my column spacing. Now you're bringing me coffee and asking if I'm okay. I'm allowed to find that suspicious." Something flickered across her face. Quick. Almost caught. "Maybe I've decided you're marginally less insufferable than I originally assessed." High praise. Don't let it go to your head. I still think your north stairwell load path is aggressive, but she was almost smiling when she said it. And she held my gaze half a second longer than the conversation required before she turned and walked back to her own desk. And I sat there for a full minute afterward, not doing any actual work, replaying the exact angle of that smile. I made it through lunch, which I ate alone at my desk instead of joining her and 2 other associates at the corner table, because I did not trust myself around her yet. It was somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, both of us buried in the same tower elevation for the Larimer Street pitch, that the banter started again, easy and automatic, the rhythm we'd built over 4 years of forced proximity. "Your shear walls fighting your own floor plan," she said, not looking up from her screen. "My shear wall is doing exactly what the client asked for." The client asked for an open floor plan and structural integrity in the same sentence, which means the client doesn't understand physics, which means it's our job to protect them from themselves. She finally looked over, eyebrows up, daring me to argue. "You're unbearably confident for someone who lost the 16th Street bid to me last spring. I didn't lose it. I let you have it so you'd stop sulking in the break room." She said it without a flicker of hesitation, and I laughed before I could stop myself, a real laugh. Loud enough that 2 people, 2 desks over, glanced up. Sienna's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile she allowed in office hours. And for one unguarded second I saw exactly what I'd heard on the phone the night before. Something soft, hiding directly beneath the sharp. I almost told her then. I almost said, "Your phone called me last night. I heard what you said, and I want you to know I've thought about nothing else since." Instead, I said something about her shear wall calculations being aggressive, and she called me a coward with better manners than her, and we went back to work like nothing had shifted at all. Even though everything had, Voss called us both into his office at 4:30, which was never a good sign on its own, and was an especially bad sign combined with the particular look on his face, the one he wore right before he did something that would make both our lives harder in the name of good design. "Director of Design opens up in 6 weeks, he said, without preamble, standing at the window instead of sitting, which was his habit when he wanted to seem like he wasn't performing. "Both of you are qualified. Both of you want it. I'm not interested in choosing between 2 adequate portfolios when I could get 1 excellent one out of the 2 of you fighting for it. You want us to compete for the promotion," I said. "I want you to compete for the Larimer Street pitch, together, as a unit, presenting jointly to the client committee in 3 weeks. Whoever contributes the stronger half of that presentation gets the director title. I'll be watching every meeting." He said it the way he said everything, like the outcome was already decided, and we were simply catching up to it. Consider it a controlled experiment. Rivalry produces better work than comfort does. I've been proving that theory with the 2 of you for 4 years. Sienna's jaw tightened, a small movement I would have missed a day earlier and now couldn't look away from. "You want us to build something together while competing for the same job. I want you to stop pretending those are different things, Voss said, and dismissed us both with the particular efficiency of a man who considered the conversation already resolved. We walked out into the open office in silence, and I felt the shape of the next 3 weeks settle over both of us like weather, working side by side on the biggest pitch of the year, both of us aware the other was, in some private and unspoken way, the obstacle standing between us and the job we'd both spent 4 years wanting. And underneath that, to Voss, invisible to the whole office, the thing only I knew that somewhere in the last 24 hours, the obstacle had started looking a great deal like something I wanted for entirely different reasons. The Larimer Street site was an old produce warehouse 3 blocks from our office, structurally sound but badly neglected, the kind of building that made engineers and architects fall equally in love, since it gave both of us something to fight over. Sienna wanted to keep the original timber trusses exposed as a design centerpiece. I wanted to reinforce them in a way that would ruin the sightline she'd built the whole concept around. We spent the first week of the pitch arguing about it in increasingly specific and increasingly personal ways. Staying late, 3 nights running, ordering the same mediocre Thai food from the place around the corner, because neither of us wanted to be the first to admit we were both still there at 8, working on the same problem, refusing to leave until it was solved. It was on the 3rd of those nights that the first real crack showed. She'd been quiet for almost an hour, sketching and erasing the same truss detail over and over, and when I finally looked over, she had her head down on folded arms for a second, just breathing, before she sat back up like nothing had happened. "You okay?" I said, careful. The way you'd ask about weather, you weren't sure was safe to mention. "Fine." She didn't look at me. "Tired. You've redrawn that joint 6 times. I know how many times I've redrawn it, Doyle. I don't need a count." But her voice had lost its usual edge, and when I got up, walked around the desks, and looked at her drawing over her shoulder instead of arguing from across the aisle, she didn't tell me to go away. "Here," I said, and took the pencil out of her hand before I could think better of it, sketching the load path the way I'd have engineered it, letting the original truss stay visible the way she wanted. Solving the problem she'd been fighting for an hour in about 90 seconds because it was, finally, a problem I actually understood. She watched my hand move across the paper without saying anything, and for a moment the only sound in the office was the scratch of pencil lead and the hum of the building's old radiators kicking on somewhere below us. Outside, the streetlights had come up gold over the rail yards, and the whole warehouse felt smaller than it did during the day, quieter, like it belonged only to the 2 of us, and whatever this was becoming. She stared at the sketch for a long moment, then at me. "You didn't have to do that. I know. You could have let me struggle, made yourself look better in front of Voss." "I could have." I set the pencil down between us instead of handing it back. A small, stupid gesture that felt enormous at the time. I didn't want to. Something moved behind her eyes. Quick, gone, before I could name it. Why not? I almost told her the truth right there, in the empty office at 9 at night with nobody around to witness either of us being anything other than professional rivals. "I almost said your phone called me last night, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since." Instead, I said, "Because I'd rather beat you when we're both doing our best work, not when you're exhausted," which was true, and also a coward's version of the truth. And she looked at me like she knew exactly which one she was hearing. "That's almost a nice thing to say," she said, finally, standing, gathering her bag. "Don't let it become a habit." But she smiled when she said it, a real one, and I thought about that smile the whole drive home, and the whole next day. and every day after that for the 2 weeks it took to get the Larimer Street presentation ready for the client committee. The presentation itself fell on a Thursday evening. The whole firm gathered in the second-floor gallery space Voss used for big pitches. Glass walls, good light. 40 folding chairs filled with the client committee and half our co-workers who'd come to watch the spectacle. Voss had all but promised them. I found Sienna an hour before doors opened, alone in the small conference room off the gallery, running through her opening slides one more time, even though she'd had them memorized for days. She looked up when I knocked on the door frame, and for a second neither of us said anything, both aware that whatever happened in the next 2 hours would settle something neither of us had fully named yet. "You look terrified," I said. "I look focused. There's a difference. You've read that opening line 4 times. I counted. You count everything. It's a strange habit." But she set the note cards down, and some of the rigid set in her shoulders eased, just slightly. "I keep thinking about what happens if this goes badly, not the pitch. The other thing is going to be fine, regardless of how the pitch goes. You don't know that. I know that I'd rather lose the director title and keep you than win it and lose whatever this is." I said it simply, without any of the nerves rattling around under my ribs, because it was true, and true things were easier to say plainly. Whatever happens in there tonight, that part isn't up for negotiation. She studied me for a long moment, something loosening behind her eyes. That's an unfair thing to say to someone 30 minutes before the biggest pitch of her career. Now I'm going to be thinking about it instead of my transition slide. Good. Your transition slide needed the distraction. It's a little flat. It is not flat. It is restrained. There's a difference. And I hate that you're right. She stood, straightened her blazer, and for a second let her hand rest against my chest, right over the fast, to unsteady beat of my heart, before she pulled it back and became, in the space of one breath, the composed, formidable architect the client committee was about to meet. "Go take your seat, Doyle. Try not to embarrass either of us." By the time the committee filed in, we'd both slipped fully into presentation mode. And if anyone in that room could see what had shifted between us in the last 2 weeks, they were polite enough not to mention it. She went first, walking the committee through the concept. The timber trusses, the way the design honored the warehouse's history while making it functional for the tech company leasing the space. She was good. She was better than good, confident in a way the office rarely got to see. And I watched her hold a room of 40 strangers exactly the way she'd once told me she never let herself be held by anyone. And something in my chest went tight and warm at the same time. Then it was my turn, walking through the structural work, the reinforcement that let her vision survive a Colorado snow load without anyone in the room ever noticing the engineering holding it up. I'd practiced this section a dozen times alone in my apartment. I still stumbled twice, because Sienna was standing 3 feet to my left, watching me with an expression I hadn't earned yet and didn't fully understand. And it was very hard to focus on beam deflection with her looking at me like that. We fielded questions together afterward, finishing each other's answers in a way that felt less like competition and more like the thing Voss had actually been trying to engineer the whole time, whether either of us wanted to admit it. The client committee lead, a sharp woman named Renata Fields, said as much when she shook both our hands afterward. "I've sat through a lot of these," she said. "I don't usually believe 2 people when they say they built something together. I believe you too." The room emptied out slowly, co-workers drifting toward the elevator, Priya pausing just long enough to mutter, "You two finished each other's sentences up there. I'm collecting on that scoreboard bet retroactively," before she vanished into the crowd, leaving both of us laughing despite ourselves. Voss stayed deep in conversation with Renata Fields near the windows, and somewhere in the gap between the last chair being folded and the lights being dimmed for the night, I found myself alone with Sienna on the gallery floor, both of us still riding the particular exhaustion that comes after performing well at something that mattered. "You stumbled on the deflection numbers," she said. "I noticed you noticing. I noticed everything tonight." She said it quietly, not looking at me, tracing the edge of a folded chair with one finger. "You gave me the joint detail 3 weeks ago, instead of letting me fail in front of Voss. You've been doing things like that the whole pitch, softening my edges, covering for me when I lost my footing on the sheer calculations Tuesday. I wasn't trying to make you look weak. I know that." She looked up at me then, and whatever she'd been holding behind her usual sharpness for 2 years was right there on the surface, unguarded, terrified, present. "That's the problem, Marcus. You keep being kind to me and I don't know what to do with it. Nobody's kind to me at this firm. Nobody's kind to me anywhere. Not since she stopped herself, jaw tight, the wall going back up almost as fast as it had come down." "Since what?" I said, gentle, giving her the room to not answer if she didn't want to. She didn't answer, but she didn't step back either. We were close enough now that I could see the exact moment she stopped deciding whether to trust me and just did it, closing the last 2 feet between us, her hand curling into the front of my shirt, the way it might if she wasn't sure whether she was pulling me closer or holding herself steady. "I'm not supposed to like you," she whispered. "You're supposed to be the person standing between me and the job." "I know," I said. "I've known since Tuesday at midnight. Actually." Her whole body went still. "What?" "Your phone called me by accident. Around midnight. I heard maybe 4 seconds before it cut off. I watched the color drain out of her face and hurried to finish before she could bolt. You said you didn't want to like me. You said something about a wall. About not wanting anyone at this firm close enough to use you again." For a long moment she just looked at me, and I genuinely could not tell if she was going to walk away or cry or both. Then, very quietly, "You've known for 2 weeks and you didn't say anything." I didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding like I'd been keeping score. "You gave me the joint detail because you felt guilty. I gave you the joint detail because I wanted to help you, and then I kept wanting to help you every day after that. And somewhere in there, I stopped being able to tell the difference between wanting to beat you and wanting to be near you." The words came out faster than I meant them to. "Unpolished. True. I'm not saying that to win anything, Sienna. I'm saying it because I'm done pretending I don't feel it." She let out a breath that was half laugh, half something rawer. "This is a terrible time for this conversation. We're both up for the same job in 4 weeks. I know. I don't do this. I don't let people see me before I've decided it's safe. I know that too. I'd still like you to try." I reached up, slow, giving her every chance to step back, and brushed a strand of hair off her face, my thumb resting for a second against her jaw. She didn't step back. She leaned into it instead, eyes closing for half a second, like she was allowing herself something she'd rationed for a very long time. "Careful, Doyle," she murmured. "If you're this convincing during a pitch, I might start believing everything you say. Maybe that's the strategy." She laughed, short and surprised, and then she kissed me. And it wasn't careful or practiced or anything either of us had planned for. It was 2 years of pretending and 2 weeks of almost collapsing into one unguarded moment on an empty gallery floor with the city lights coming up gold through the warehouse windows. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine, breathing unsteady. "This complicates everything. Only if we let it. Voss is going to notice. Voss already thinks rivalry produces good work. Let him think we're just very committed to method acting." That earned another laugh, softer this time, and she tucked herself against my chest for a moment. both of us still catching our breath in the quiet gallery. And for the first time in 4 years I understood exactly what I'd been mistaking for competition the whole time. She told me the rest of it 3 nights later, sitting on the tailgate of my truck in the parking lot behind the warehouse, a 6-pack between us that neither of us was drinking very fast. "Before this firm," she said, staring out at the empty lot instead of at me, "I worked for a partner named Desmond Okafor, brilliant, charismatic, ran the kind of studio everyone in this city wanted to get into." She turned the bottle in her hands. "Not drinking. I designed the signature project of his career, a civic library downtown, the one that won the regional award 2 years ago. My concept, my drawings, my name on almost none of it. He took credit. He took everything, and when I pushed back in front of the partners, he told them I was being emotional, territorial, difficult to work with. He made it sound like I was trying to steal credit instead of reclaim it, and because he was the one with the reputation, and I was the one with 2 years of experience. Everyone believed him. Her voice stayed level, but her hand found mine on the tailgate without either of us deciding it should. I left 6 months later, came here, promised myself I'd never let anyone get close enough at work to use me again. Not colleagues, not partners, definitely not the guy across the aisle who kept beating me to every good project. And then the guy across the aisle started fixing your joint details. And then the guy across the aisle started fixing my joint details, and staying late for no reason, and being kind in a way I didn't know how to defend against, and I hated it. And I didn't hate it at all. And that's exactly what I was trying to explain to Talia when my phone decided to humiliate me in front of the person I was talking about. She finally looked at me. Something raw and open in her face that I understood now had cost her a great deal to allow. "I don't want to be someone's mistake again, Marcus. I don't want to be talented and quiet about it because it's safer. You won't be. Not with me." I laced my fingers through hers, and for a moment neither of us said anything, just sat there with the parking lot lights buzzing faintly overhead and the 6-pack going warm between us, both of us aware that whatever came next would matter more than either of us had let ourselves admit until tonight. "I don't want your quiet version. I want the one who told Voss his shear wall theory was outdated to his face in a partners meeting. I want the one who redraws a joint 6 times because she refuses to let it be less than right." She reached into her bag and pulled out a battered sketchbook, corners soft with age, and set it on the tailgate between us like she was handing over something fragile. I haven't shown anyone this since I left the library project. I opened it carefully. Page after page of concept sketches, loose and confident. Ideas that had never made it into any client presentation, because she'd stopped trusting rooms full of people to see them fairly. Somewhere in the middle, half finished, was a sketch of an old brick warehouse with exposed timber trusses, dated almost 3 years back. "That's Larimer Street," I said, surprised. "You'd already drawn this." "I drew it the week I interviewed here. I used to keep a folder of buildings I wanted to save someday. Back before I convinced myself wanting things loudly was dangerous." She traced the edge of the sketch with one finger, not quite meeting my eyes. When Voss assigned us the site 3 years later, I almost didn't recognize it as the same building. I think some part of me had been carrying that drawing around for 3 years, waiting for someone I trusted enough to build it with. "You could have shown me sooner." "I could have. I didn't know yet that you were someone I trusted." She finally looked up, something unguarded and a little frightened still living behind her eyes. "I know now." Her eyes filled, and she blinked hard, annoyed at herself for it, which made me love her more, not less. "Work out loud," she said. A phrase I didn't understand yet, but would come to learn, was the closest thing she had to a promise. That's what Talia always tells me. Work out loud instead of pretending you're fine. Then work out loud. I said, I'm listening. She did, sitting on that tailgate for another hour, telling me about Desmond Okafor's voice in her head every time she second-guessed a design, about the year she stopped showing anyone her sketchbooks, about the specific, exhausting effort it had taken to walk into Voss and Bell every day for 4 years and act like competing with me was the hardest thing in her life, when really the hardest thing had been trying not to want something softer from someone who'd only ever been positioned as her opponent. The threat that nearly undid us didn't come from Preston Voss at all. Not at first. It came from a name Sienna hadn't spoken since the night on the tailgate. At the Regional Design Awards 2 weeks after the Larimer Street pitch closed, in a ballroom full of exactly the kind of people who would recognize him on sight, Desmond Okafor found us near the bar, tall and unhurried, and dressed like a man who'd never once doubted his own welcome in a room. Sienna Cross, he said, like he was trying the name on for size after a long absence. I heard about Larimer Street. Impressive work. Almost surprising, given where you started out. I felt Sienna go rigid beside me before she answered, her voice perfectly level in a way that told me exactly how much effort it was costing her. Desmond, I'm opening a new studio downtown. Boutique. High-end. The kind of work that actually gets remembered. His eyes flicked to me. Dismissive. Then back to her. I could use someone with your instincts. Someone who understands that the best ideas in a room don't always come from the person whose name ends up on the plaque. That's an interesting offer, coming from you, Sienna said, and I heard the years of practiced calm in it. The wall she'd built specifically for conversations like this one. I've grown since the library project. We both have. He smiled. Easy. The smile of a man who'd never once had to answer for anything. I'd hate to see talent like yours stall out at a firm that has you competing with junior engineers for scraps of credit. He's not a junior engineer, I said, before I could stop myself. He built half of what won that pitch, and he's standing right here. So maybe address him directly instead of pretending he's furniture. Desmond's eyes cut to me, mildly surprised. The way a man is surprised when the scenery talks back. And you are. The person who watched her rebuild everything you tried to take credit for. Marcus Doyle. Something flickered across Desmond's face. Gone fast. Replaced by the same unbothered smile. Ah, the rivalry turned something else. Word travels. He looked back at Sienna. Unbothered. Needling in the specific way of a man who'd made a career out of finding people's soft spots and pressing them in public. I only ever wanted what was best for that library. Sienna, you were young, emotional. I did what any senior partner would have done to protect the project's reputation. You stood in front of 11 people and told them I was difficult, Sienna said, and her voice had stopped being level, had gone instead to something low and precise and furious. You built your entire second act on a design I handed you because I trusted you, and then you called me unstable for asking for my name on it. I'm not young anymore. Desmond, I'm not asking twice. The silence that followed lasted just long enough for 2 people near the bar to notice and pretend not to. Then Desmond shrugged, unbothered, already turning to find someone else in the room worth his time. The offer stands. If you change your mind, good work rarely stays modest for long. He walked off into the crowd, and Sienna stood very still beside me, breathing hard, her hand shaking slightly around her glass until I covered it with mine. You didn't have to say anything, she said quietly. I know. I wanted to. I took the glass from her hand before it could spill and set it on the nearest table. You've spent 2 years letting that man live rent-free in your head, telling you what you're allowed to want. I'm not going to stand next to you and pretend I didn't hear him do it again. She let out a breath that shook on the way out. I almost said yes to him once, right after I left the library project. I was so angry and so tired of starting over that a studio with his name on it almost sounded like winning. What changed? Voss and Bell hired me instead, and gave me a desk across from the most infuriating engineer I'd ever met. And somewhere in the last 4 years I stopped needing Desmond Okafor's version of success to feel like mine. She looked up at me, something fierce and grateful, tangled together in her expression. I'm glad you were standing here for that. I'm not going anywhere, I said, and meant it in every sense the sentence could carry. The promotion decision came due the same week, and it was Preston Voss who nearly complicated things further, in the particular way only a man convinced of his own good intentions can manage. He called us both into his office on a Monday morning, and this time he didn't stand at the window performing detachment. He sat, which was somehow worse, because it meant he'd already decided something and wanted us seated for it. I've been in this business 30 years, he said. I know what I'm looking at when two people who used to fight over every drawing start finishing each other's sentences in client meetings. He looked between us, not unkindly, but with the flat certainty of a man who believed he understood the situation better than the people living inside it. You've gotten involved, personally. Neither of us denied it. There didn't seem to be much point. I built this rivalry deliberately, Voss continued. 4 years of pairing you on every difficult project, because the friction made both of you sharper than either of you would have been comfortable. That friction is gone now. I watched you soften each other's edges through the entire Larimer Street pitch, and while the presentation itself was excellent, I have to ask whether it was excellent because of the tension I engineered, or in spite of it dissolving. It was excellent because we finally stopped wasting energy competing over things that didn't matter and started building something that did, Sienna said, her voice steady in a way I recognized now as the voice she used when she decided something was worth the risk. You don't get to take credit for that by calling it friction, Preston. That's not mentorship. That's manipulation, and I'm done pretending it isn't. Voss's expression didn't change, but something in the room did. I could give the director title to neither of you. Bring in an outside hire who doesn't come with complications. You could, I said, or you could look at the actual work. The client loved the presentation. Renata Fields specifically said she believed we built it together, and she was right. We did. And that partnership is the reason it worked. Not some theory about rivalry. You've been running as an experiment on 2 employees for 4 years, without ever asking whether we wanted to be your case study. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Voss looked at the two of us. Really looked. The way I imagined he'd looked at blueprints his whole career, searching for the load-bearing element in a structure he was trying to understand. The director role can be shared, he said finally, slower than I'd ever heard him speak. It hasn't been done here before. It could be done. He stood, moved to the window out of habit, and this time it looked less like performance and more like a man genuinely reconsidering something he'd built his whole management philosophy around. I'll need to see you prove the partnership works under normal pressure, not just pitch adrenaline. No more manufactured rivalry from my end. You'll have to build whatever this is on your own terms. He turned back to face us, and for the first time in 4 years I saw something almost apologetic cross his expression, quickly smoothed over into his usual composure. I built a career on the theory that competition sharpens people faster than support does. I'm not going to pretend I've abandoned that theory overnight, but I watched the two of you build something better than anything either of you built fighting each other. And a man my age ought to know when to update his own equations. He almost smiled, an expression that looked unpracticed on his face. Don't make me regret this. You won't, Sienna said. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly, but it was Preston Voss admitting, in the only language he had, that he might have gotten something wrong about the two of us for 4 straight years. We walked out of that office together, and Sienna's hand found mine in the hallway where anyone could see, and neither of us pulled away. And that, more than the promotion, more than the pitch, more than any of it, felt like the actual resolution. 6 months later, on a Saturday in early spring, Sienna's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter of the apartment we'd moved into together in January. She glanced at it, laughed, and turned the screen toward me. A missed call to Talia, 11:58 at night, 3 minutes long. The kind of accidental pocket dial that had once rearranged both our lives without either of us choosing it. "Some things never change," she said. "Should I be worried about what you're telling Talia this time?" "Terribly worried." I told her you still redraw my joint details when you think I'm not looking, and that I let you. Because apparently I like watching you fix things I'm perfectly capable of fixing myself. That does sound like grounds for concern. She crossed the kitchen, kissed me slow and easy, in a way that still, after 6 months, made my chest go tight and warm at the same time, and rested her forehead against mine the way she had that first night on the gallery floor. "I used to think being someone's rival was the safest thing I could be at that firm," she said. "Turns out being someone's partner is a lot better, even when it's terrifying." We stayed at Voss and Bell, co-leading the design department the way Preston Voss had never planned for and had, eventually, come to credit as his own idea, which we let him keep, because some victories aren't worth the argument. The Larimer Street building opened that fall with both our names on the plaque out front, and Renata Fields sent champagne to the office with a note that just said, "Told you I believed the partnership." Talia flew out from Chicago for the opening, and cornered me by the drinks table long enough to say, with the particular bluntness of someone who'd clearly heard every unfiltered version of this story over the phone for months, "You know, she called me 11 times that first week deciding whether to trust you." 11. I counted, because apparently that's a thing you two do to feel better about your feelings. She raised her glass at me. "Almost fond. Don't waste it." I didn't. Sienna still redraws the same joint detail more times than strictly necessary, and I still let her get there on her own before I offer to help. Because I learned early that the help mattered more when she'd asked for it instead of needing it handed to her. Some evenings, after the office empties out, and it's just the two of us, finishing a deadline the way we always used to, I catch her sketching something in the margins of a drawing that has nothing to do with the project in front of us. And when I ask what it is, she just tells me it's not ready yet. The same way she once kept a warehouse sketch folded away for 3 years, waiting for the right person to build it with. Priya still teases us both about the old office scoreboard on the refrigerator, and swears she's the one who taped it up in the first place. Though neither of us has ever been able to prove it, she started keeping a running tally of our inside jokes on a sticky note stuck to her monitor, which she updates without either of us asking, and which currently reads, in her handwriting, the Doyle patch, the cross correction, 11 missed calls, and the midnight pocket dial that changed everything, a phrase she refuses to let either of us live down at any office happy hour. Preston Voss has, twice now, tried to take credit for the joint directorship at partner dinners, and both times Sienna has let him finish the story before calmly correcting the record in front of everyone, which he has learned, slowly, to stop doing, and every so often, usually late at night, her phone still calls someone by accident from the bottom of her bag, and every time it happens, both of us laugh, because we both know exactly how that story ends now. I've stopped bracing for the sound of it. I've started, instead, listening for whatever she'll say next, certain now that whatever it is, I'm allowed to hear it, and that whatever she says, I'll want to be standing exactly where I am when she says it, Some rivalries end in a winner and a loser. Ours ended in a partnership neither of us saw coming, built the same way we build everything else. One honest detail at a time. One accidental midnight phone call away from a life I never planned for and would not trade back for anything. Not the title. Not the trophy case downtown. Not even the satisfaction of finally winning an argument I'd been losing to her, quietly, since the very first week we met. If you'd asked me 4 years ago whether the woman redlining my drawings across the aisle would someday be the person I built a life with, I'd have laughed and gone back to work. Certain I already knew exactly how our story was going to end. I would have been wrong about almost every part of it. And I have never once regretted being wrong about anything the way I don't regret being wrong about her, about us, about every version of this story I thought I already knew the ending to. What would you have done if a midnight pocket dial let you overhear your work rival admitting something they never meant for you to hear? Would you have said something the next morning, or waited like I did? Have you ever had a rivalry turn into something you never saw coming? Tell your story in the comments below. And if you'd like to be a little closer to us, we've opened memberships where you'll get shorter, exclusive stories every week with no ads. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.